Welcome to Module 6. In this module, we'll cover configuration logging. Our objectives for this module are to cover what configuration logging is, how to configure configuration logging, reporting for configuration logs, as well as deleting configuration logs. Configuration logging provides an audit trail for changes that have been made to the environment. It'll provide what change was made as well as who made the change. Configuration logging is enabled by default. Citrix Studio is the interface through which we'll configure configuration logging as well as viewing the log information. Mandatory logging is a feature that prevents changes from being made to the Citrix XenDesktop environment in the event that there's a database disconnect, which essentially means that changes can't be made unless they can be logged as well. Citrix strongly recommends changing the location of the database used for Citrix logging or configuration logging. We'll be covering enabling, disabling configuration logging, enabling as well as disabling mandatory logging, and we'll look at where we would change the configuration logging database. For our reporting, we can generate reports in two formats, one of them being CSV as well as HTML. And for deleting the configuration database, certain permissions are required. This feature allows you to configure certain administrators that are allowed to delete configuration logs. All right, at this point, we'll go ahead and jump to our Citrix XenDesktop server, and we'll open up Citrix Studio. Okay, and from the left panel, we'll jump down to logging. And here we're presented with the welcome message. And so what we'll go ahead and do is over here, we'll click on preferences. And here's where we would disable as well as enable configuration logging. And then we jump down to change logging database if we wanted to move where we were logging the changes. If we wanted to move it to a remote SQL server, we'd go ahead and provide the appropriate information. And then after we provided that information, if we didn't have permissions for that particular database, we could generate a database script and provide it to our DBA for them to enter in that information. And then the final configuration option on this logging preferences menu is allow changes when the database is disconnected. This particular checkbox determines whether mandatory logging is enabled or disabled. So right now we're allowing changes when the database is disconnected through the check mark. So at this point, mandatory logging is disabled. So if we wanted to make sure that changes were logged, even in the event that a database disconnection, we would uncheck this check mark to ensure that no changes could be made unless they're logged. All right, so we'll go ahead and work on creating reports. So we'll go ahead and on the right panel, choose the option Create Custom Report. So at this point, we can select the period of time that we want to create our reports for. So in this case, I'll just choose the last 7 days. And here are options for CSV file as well as HTML. And there's also an option to choose both. Then it's asking us to provide a location to save the reports. So in this case, I'll go ahead and save it to my documents. Choose next. Provide the summary of the information we just entered. Choose finish. All right, let's create our report. So we'll go ahead and jump to my documents and we'll look at the reports. Look at the HTML first. Choose summary. All right, and this provides us a summary of all the changes that have been made, whether they've succeeded or whether we had any failures. That information provided. We can also choose to click the details to view more information about the particular task. All right, so we'll go ahead and close that report. And then there's the CSV file, which will provide the same information, just within generally an Excel spreadsheet format. All right, and the final task that we'll cover is deleting logs. So on the right panel, we'll choose delete logs. All right, and it's asking us right now essentially whether we want to create a backup copy of the information that's in the log right now. So I'll go ahead and choose yes. And then I'll browse to where I want to save it. I'll go ahead and provide it with the name, backup logs. All right, at this point I can choose my format, either CSV or a text file. I'll go ahead and choose a text file. So go ahead and add the extension of .txt to the end of my file. And I'll choose save. We'll go next. All right, provides a summary as well as a message at the bottom indicating that strict authentication is required in order to delete logs. So essentially you have to have the appropriate permissions in order to delete logs. And so now it's asking for the SQL information. And in my case, it is the SQL Express installation for minimal install. So that'll be Windows integrated authentication. So provide the account that I'm currently logged into the machine with, which is a domain admin. All right, and we can see at this point all have my logs have been deleted. And so we'll go ahead and check and make sure the backup of the logs is valid. All right, so all that information is there. Obviously, it's in a text file, not the prettiest format. I can go ahead and see if I can word wrap it. So probably the best option is to dump it to a CSV for better formatting. So go ahead and close that out and go ahead and wrap up module 6.